Matters webinar, A Certain Future, and we're going to be discussing the importance of nuclear energy plants. With us here today are two great panelists who are excited to answer the questions that you've submitted on Twitter and Facebook. My name is Felix Meissner. I am the president of the North American Young Generation in Nuclear, or NAYGN. And for those of you who aren't familiar, we are the premier professional development society for the young generation within the nuclear industry. We have over 11,000 members, and we have over 110 local chapters. Next, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Secretary Spencer Abraham. He's the chairman and CEO of the Abraham Group, an international strategic consulting firm focused on the energy sector and based in Washington, D.C. Secretary Abraham served as the 10th Secretary of Energy in the United States history from 2001 to 2005 under President George W.H. Bush. Before that, he served as a Republican US Senator from Michigan for 6 years, from 1995 to 2001. Also with us today is Senator Evan Bayh. Senator Bayh is a partner at McGuire Woods LLP in Washington, D.C., and a senior advisor at Apollo Global Management in New York. He served as a Democratic Senator of Indiana for 2 terms, from 1999 to 2011. And before that, he was the governor of Indiana for 8 years, from 1989 to 1997. Secretary Abraham and Senator Bayh, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Bayh, for those who aren't aware of Nuclear Matters and its mission, what exactly does Nuclear Matters do? Or, as James Skiles asks, Twitter handle, Ask a Cyber Lawyer, what are you trying to accomplish?
Felix, thank you. It's good to be with you today. And Spence, let me say it's good to be with you again. And thanks to everybody out there who's joined us today. Well, let me answer the question directly. We are attempting to, this is an educational effort here at the beginning, to make more of the American people aware of the important role that nuclear power plays in our country. I've been surprised to see how little most Americans really know about this issue. For example, the vast majority of people I've encountered don't realize that 20% of America's electricity is generated by nuclear power. And they're even more surprised to learn that 62 or 3%, close to 2/3 of our zero carbon electricity is generated by nuclear power. They also are a little unaware, and I wouldn't have focused on this before getting into it, the importance of diversity in our energy supply, the importance of reliability. You may recall in recent years we've had the Snowmageddon and other events like that, and so we can't just take for granted when we flip on the lights or we go to our jobs that the power is going to be there. But we came perilously close a couple of times to having some brownouts because of extreme weather. Nuclear power runs pretty much 24/7 in a very reliable way. So we're trying to get all of that out, Felix, and also about some of the challenges that nuclear power currently faces. A couple of the plants have been closed here recently, and there are some ongoing challenges. And so if that trend continues, it could have some major policy ramifications for our country that we need to be giving some thought to so that we can come up with the thoughtful policy responses that are in the best interest of the American people. So that's basically, what are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to educate the American people about the role that nuclear plays, about some of the challenges that it faces, and then ultimately start a discussion about what can we do about those challenges.
Great, thanks. And as you mentioned, nuclear power plants really do play such a critical role in today's electricity market. Secretary Abraham, what's your take on why exactly nuclear energy plants matter? What are some of their benefits? And more specifically, Elizabeth McAndrew, Twitter handle @NuclearLiz, wants to know, how can nuclear energy help support climate change goals?
Well, Felix, let me also start by thanking you and saying hi to my former colleague and friend Evan Bayh. We had a chance to work together for a while in the Senate. It was always good to have a chance to collaborate with him, and I'm glad to have the chance to continue doing so here today and and part of our nuclear matters program. One of the interesting things about the history of nuclear energy is that it has gone from being something that was a promising and major source of electricity production to being at various times seen as a potential threat to safety and in its usage to returning now as bringing a very important set of positive attributes to our economy, to our energy mix, and to the battle to reduce emissions into the atmosphere. So let's just talk about your question from the point of view of the benefits. Nuclear power by itself, and I think Senator Bayh mentioned this, accounts for almost 17 to 19% of our entire power generation in the U.S. But it's especially important because it's baseload energy, which means that it's there all the time. It isn't intermittent. And as we learned during the polar vortex this past winter, when we were having trouble with plants that relied on the transportation of fuel and so on, whether it was natural gas types of plants or oil generators, nuclear power is highly reliable. And so that's a major asset of nuclear energy. Second, we're in no risk of running out of the feedstock for nuclear power. There's a long-term availability of uranium that's used to power the nuclear generators that we have. And then, of course, and this is to the last part of the question, is the fact that nuclear plants operate pretty much emission-free. And when you're looking at the whole issue of meeting any kinds of goals that have been set for emission targets, whether it's the emissions of sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, mercury, or carbon, having the ability to produce large volumes of electricity without running the risk of producing a lot of emissions into the atmosphere makes nuclear energy very attractive. I've always been frustrated by the people who want to reduce pollution, want to reduce emissions of carbon dioxide, also being oftentimes people who oppose the development of our nuclear sector. Those are really very mutually inconsistent goals. If you want to fight these emissions, if you care about global warming and climate change and the issues that relate to carbon emissions, nuclear energy is really a foundation building block when it comes to that issue, because it's a big part of our electricity mix, and as I think Evan said earlier, about 63% of the emission-free electricity production in America today comes from the operation of our nuclear fleet.
Great, thank you. How about some of the benefits on the economic side? We've heard an awful lot about the powerful economic engines that nuclear power plants are. There are some studies that show that each reactor employs anywhere from 400 to up to 700 highly skilled workers, and the plants have payrolls of about $40 million to support those workers. And on average, each plant contributes $470 million to the local economy. Senator Bayh, could you comment on that stat?
Well, I think you've laid it out pretty well. Not only are there many jobs created by nuclear power, but they tend to pay substantially above the average wage. So these tend to be good middle-class level jobs, which our country is, of course, struggling to create enough of those these days. Secondly, and both the Secretary and I have touched upon this, in terms of economic development, dependability, reliability is an important factor. It's hard to build a plant or a business someplace if you're not pretty sure you're going to have to have a steady, reliable energy source. You could face a disruption that could be very damaging to many businesses. Third, this is an entirely domestically generated energy source. Doesn't contribute to our imbalance of payments because we've got to import this activity. It can be generated right here at home. So these plants tend to be very popular in the local communities. They contribute a lot to local property taxes, the school districts. They're steady employers. And so for all the reasons you've outlined and some of the ones I've touched upon and the Secretary mentioned, nuclear power is an important contributor both directly and indirectly to America's economic competitiveness.
Great, thank you. Secretary Abraham, why are you involved with nuclear matters? Why now?
Well, let me take the clock back a little bit to the time I served as Energy Secretary, 2001 to 2005. And at that point, one of our priorities at the department was to try to look forward and try to really develop an energy plan for the 21st century, at least for the first part of it. And we quickly recognized back at that time that nuclear energy needed to be an essential part of America's domestic energy production. But we were already starting to see that a lot of the plants were aging. We were seeing as recently as a few years ago that there was concerns about the survivability of some of these plants because of the variety of economic issues that are going on in the energy sector. The low cost of natural gas, the way in which we return, we provide returns on capital to utility companies that own nuclear plants and so on. It was sort of people call it a perfect storm of events happening that were going to make survival for these plants more challenging. And then we also had issues that related to the exciting prospect of new generation reactors being built in the US. And so as early as 2001, when I became Energy Secretary, I've been focused on this because I feel nuclear has to play a key part in our energy mix, that a new generation of reactors is a very attractive direction for us to develop because they're safer, because they provide jobs, as was just outlined by Evan in his comments, and because as you look forward to trying to reduce emissions, nuclear power plants play a vital role. Well, with that as sort of the background, I look around today and I see some of our nuclear fleet being taken offline. I see people questioning whether certain other plants are going to be continued, and it worries me because you could easily fall into a pattern where the role nuclear plays is diminished. And I don't think that makes any sense at all for the country from either an economic point of view or a security point of view. And so for that reason, I think this is the right time to begin a real public discussion about nuclear power, about why it is important, or why it matters, as you said. And I think it's exciting that so many people from both political parties, from business as well as labor, from environmental and industrial sectors are coming together to really try to have this discussion to help to educate Americans on the role nuclear energy can play, is playing, and needs to play in the future.
Great. Thank you, Secretary. Senator Bayh, what about you? What drives you for nuclear matters? Why are you involved?
Well, we touched upon several of the reasons. Number one, our economy continues to struggle to get going. Nuclear power plays an important role, as I mentioned previously, both directly and indirectly in creating and sustaining good jobs. Secondly, quality of life. The American people depend upon a steady, reliable source of energy in our daily lives, around our homes, in our businesses. It's an important part of the quality of life here in our country. And nuclear faces some challenges now that if this 18, 19, 20% of our electric generation is threatened, that could have some real consequences. Third, if you believe that we need to do something about CO2 emissions, and you're going to be at all sort of objective about it, you have to admit that if we remove 63% of the current zero carbon electric generation, that's going to do nothing but make that challenge more harder to meet, and it will definitely make getting anything done from a legislating standpoint much harder. And so, for environmental reasons, I think it's important. And you can look around, look around the world. The Germans, for example, decided that they were going to start shutting down their nuclear generation capacity for a variety of reasons. And what they've discovered is they're now paying more for their energy generation, and they're emitting more carbon. I suspect that's not something most Americans would think is the best outcome, paying more and emitting more carbon, but that's what the experience has been in Germany. In Japan, even after the terrible challenge of Fukushima, the Japanese have looked at all the different alternatives and have concluded that they want to get in the business of starting to reopening those facilities. China, there were just articles in the newspapers this last week, is going to be aggressively adding new nuclear generation because they think it's important to them for their economic growth, to try and keep carbon down, to diversify away from just coal and that sort of thing. So for economic, for quality of life, for environmental reasons, that's why I'm involved.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that does really cover on a lot of different topics. Secretary Abraham, the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, just released a report endorsing the Yucca Mountain Repository as a safe, viable storage facility for nuclear waste. What is Nuclear Matters' position on this issue? Can we store waste safely?
Well,
step back. My own members at NAYGN are curious. Why use nuclear fuel casks? Use nuclear fuel in casks and Yucca Mountain if we have the technology to reprocess? Doesn't that seem a little wasteful?
Well, I have been involved in this debate, Felix, for a long time. As Energy Secretary, I inherited a legislative mandate that required the department, and specifically the Secretary, to make a recommendation regarding moving forward with the Yucca Mountain project based on the scientific research that had been conducted over many years as to its viability. And back in 2002, I made a recommendation to move forward to the President. He confirmed that recommendation. Congress later affirmed it as well. And based on the information we had at that time, I thought that the evidence was quite clear that we could make the underground storage of waste a safe alternative for us to pursue. Then, through a variety of court decisions and other issues that arose in Congress, things got delayed and put on hold, and yet another study was conducted. I was somewhat gratified to see that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission reached the same verdict that we had regarding the safety of the Yucca Mountain project. As to the issue of reprocessing, that too is something which the United States considered, and for a variety of reasons that had to do with concerns about proliferation back in the 1970s, the decision was to move in a different direction, and that really is how the whole idea of underground storage gained momentum. As you look around the world today, one of the interesting things is that back in the 70s, when the United States decided not to move ahead with recycling nuclear waste and reprocessing, part of our rationale that was employed was that we were afraid other countries in the world would do this. They would be less scrupulous in how they would handle the security of the nuclear materials, and it could lead to proliferation of dangerous nuclear material. So the United States didn't move ahead with reprocessing, but other countries did. And so in places like France, as you know, approximately 60 to 70% of its power is generated by nuclear energy, and reprocessing is used to continue to make viable the waste products of those power plants so that it can be reused in different form in other power plants in France, other nuclear plants, MAX facilities. So I think what we've learned is that is that reprocessing can be done safely. We've also now discovered again that storage underground can be done safely, and I hope that a consensus can form to try to follow a direction that ensures the long-term viability of our nuclear fleet by providing those who run the fleet with a safe alternative way of handling nuclear waste in the future. At this point, I think we still need to form that consensus, but I think that the two directions are both viable ones if they are chosen.
Great, thank you. Yes, we definitely do need a solution to move forward. Senator Bayh, earlier you mentioned some of the challenges that are facing our existing nuclear power plants. Could you expand on those a little bit? And as part of that, Amelia, with a Twitter handle Amelia Hammy, wants to understand natural gas is cheaper than nuclear power. Isn't that a good thing?
Yes, Amelia, it is a good thing, and it's been good for our country. But you don't want to become too dependent upon just one or two sources of energy, because nobody can predict the future with a whole lot of clarity. For example, 10 years ago, no one could have anticipated this dramatic fall in the price of gas. And it's very hard to anticipate 10, 15, 20 years from now where America will be. So it really is in our best interest to have a diverse and therefore more reliable source of energy, and nuclear needs to be an important component of that. And there are some dependability features, the Secretary touched upon them, where nuclear is a 24/7 operation, a base capacity load generator, and is not as susceptible to interruption by the weather and other things like that, which even gas can be from time to time. So that's my answer to the second part of Amelia's question. The first part, what are the challenges that are facing the industry? Well, these plants are capital intensive. That's a fancy way of saying they're expensive. And so when you build one, you've got to anticipate what the demand is going to be for 30, 40, 50-year period of time. The economy, as we all know, since the recession that we're just finally coming out of, has been very sluggish. So the demand has been down. And that is, that's a challenge to these facilities. Number one. Number two, Amelia mentioned the very, very low price of natural gas. Who knows how long that will last, but that's a challenge, an alternative fuel. Number three, our antiquated transmission system means it's hard sometimes to get the electricity generated by nuclear facilities into the marketplace in an efficient way. That's number three. And number four, Felix, some of the major attributes, the benefits to society, this is what an economist might call a market imperfection. Some of the major benefits that nuclear power has for our society are not valued in the marketplace right now as they should be. For example, the reliability. It's very important to us that even when it gets very cold, even when there are a variety of other conditions that might disrupt the power supply, that we can rely on the power supply. Nuclear provides that, and yet the marketplace doesn't put a value on reliability, even though it's unquestionably it has a value. That's number one. Number two, zero carbon emissions. Those are valued currently from a couple of other energy sources, but the fact that nuclear provides 62, 63% of our zero carbon electricity production, that's not valued by government policy or in the marketplace right now, even though unquestionably it's a major contributor and needs to continue to be a major contributor to us solving our CO2 challenge. So you put all those things together and it's a challenging environment, and as I mentioned, a couple of nuclear plants have been closed down recently, a couple more are in danger of that similar fate, and so we really need to have this robust dialogue and then begin to talk about what we're going to do about this. Otherwise we're just sort of sleepwalking into an energy future and may not be very happy with what we find, a little bit like what's confronted Germany, which I mentioned a few moments ago.
Definitely. Thanks, Senator. You know, someone once told me that electric companies are only talked about in society in two settings. One, when the electricity prices go up, and two, when the power goes out. Turning a light on or plugging something in and having that device work is often something that we take for granted. Secretary Abraham, we often discuss energy issues on a large and macro scale, but could you touch on how nuclear energy plants affect us on an individual level? What role do they play in our lives?
Well, first let me just say that having served as Energy Secretary, I would say that not only is our electricity plants only thought about and talked about when the lights go out or the prices go up, but energy secretaries are similarly treated, Felix. I mean, the only time I was ever in the media when I was secretary was when we had the Northeast blackout in 2003, or when we had price spikes that came about for varieties of reasons, and it is something that is too often taken for granted by people, and so that gets to your question in a way. You know, I do think on an individual basis, people need to appreciate, you know, just how dependent we all are on the knowledge that when we flip a switch, the lights do go on. When we are in a heat or a very hot or a very cold climate situation, the air conditioner or the furnace goes on. That dependency is tested from time to time, and when it happens, where we find ourselves unable to use our computers or unable to use our appliances, or forced because of some type of power outage to leave our homes, then we understand just how vital the providing of electricity is to our society, to our economy, and really to our whole way of life. And without nuclear power plants, we you know, that we wouldn't be able to have that, you know, that reliability, that confidence. They provide, we've said it 2 or 3 times here, 18–19% of our power generation. They provide baseload power, a power that's there day and night, 24/7, rain or shine, hot or cold. They provide communities with jobs and opportunities. And so, if you happen to be a person who lives in the, you know, in the area near a nuclear power plant, it means to you not just electricity, but it may have a direct bearing on your livelihood. It means that, you know, the issues related to carbon emissions or to the emissions of pollutants like mercury or SOx or NOx. It means the much lower emissions. And if you care about your environment and you care about the future of your family and the sustainability of the planet, then nuclear energy is very important to you as well. So all of these really are things that make nuclear power relevant to individuals. More so, obviously, if you happen to be directly involved in the industry, but critical regardless of whether you work at a nuclear plant or live near a nuclear plant, because without that fleet, our electricity transmission system, grid reliability would all disintegrate. For those who somehow think we could quickly substitute for the nuclear plants in America, they're simply wrong. We couldn't do that. We would go through a period, I think, of great economic dislocation. A large number of plants could not continue for some reason related to their economic viability. And so, for all those reasons, nuclear power plants do directly affect the lives of virtually every American.
Great. Those are some good thoughts. Thank you, Secretary. Senator Bayh, we heard a lot of great reasons today on why nuclear matters, and I'm sure everybody in our audience today is inspired. What if they want to know more? How can they get themselves participating in the campaign or their organizations? How can they get involved to support nuclear matters?
Well, that's a great question, and we've got a website and all that kind of thing. Matter of fact, Patrick, how many Facebook followers do we have now?
100,000.
We have 100,000 following us on Facebook now. So, Spence, you're probably getting some positive comments there, unrelated to prices going up or disruption of service. We can only hope. And so we can post the site you can go to get more information, but also get involved. Talk to your local officials, talk to your federal officials, educate yourself, and then educate them. My experience has been that the policymakers really can be impacted when they hear, not from things that are obviously not genuine, but from a well educated, informed effort can really be impacted by people who take the time to reach out and express their opinion. And I would urge people who care about this issue to do that.
Great, thanks. And that's what America is all about, right?
That's how a democracy should function.
Let me just add, Felix, if I could. I really just build on what Evan said. One of the things when you're in public office, in elected office in particular, that you run into, and that is that people who are, opposing something or, trying to raise objections to things, oftentimes get most of the attention. The people who are happy with the way things are going typically aren't heard from enough. And so it is important that people, who are in elected office know that a lot of folks they represent are supporters and want to see the continuation of the nuclear power sector in this country. The anti-nuclear element, the people who oppose nuclear power plants, are visible and very active. And what we don't want are for our decision makers, whether they're in elected or appointed offices, to assume that there is another side to the story and that there aren't lots of people who they represent who don't want to see the continuation of our nuclear fleet and support that. And so it is important to have your voice heard. If you understand and support the notion that nuclear power plays a vital role in our economy, in our power mix, and in our society.
Felix, can I add just one more thing along those lines? One of the good things about this effort has been the ability to really bring people together and build bridges of cooperation that too infrequently exist today. I mean, everyone who's joined us is aware this is a very polarized time in our public debate, unfortunately, Democrats versus Republicans, liberals versus conservatives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But here we have Secretary Abraham and myself, a Republican and a Democrat, both advocating for what we believe to be right in this area. We have environmentalists, well known, like Carol Browner, who's actively involved, along with leaders of business and industry. We have people from the academic community, some very thoughtful academics. And environmentalists have concluded that if we really want to be practical about this, about reducing CO2 emissions, nuclear power has to continue to play a part. And one of the first events that I attended was in Philadelphia. It was hosted by the Chamber of Commerce, but the local representative of the AFL-CIO attended, and two international presidents of labor organizations are on our advisory board. So there you have labor and business working together. So this really is a rare opportunity for us to build bridges of cooperation and actually, get something done in a practical way. And regrettably, at this moment in time, there aren't that many opportunities to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, those are good closing thoughts. Secretary Abraham, Senator Bayh, thank you so much for your participation today.
Thank you.